Welcome back to 9.09ers YouTube channel. If you are a first timer, don't forget to click the subscribe button. You will notice that we have more than 100 videos to help you ace your iELTS, OET, PTE, TOEFL, and SELPIP. Not only that, we also have free videos on how to improve your grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, spelling, and even how to neutralize your accent. So I'm Coach Ervin and this is Coach Brian. Both of us have taken the iELTS, both academic and general training module, one with IDP and one with British Council. And we've been teaching iELTS for more than 15 years already. Let's begin with the subject for this particular video. It's iELTS Writing Task 1. We're done with how to improve your vocabulary in iELTS speaking. We're finished with how to improve your vocab in iELTS Writing Task 2. But why is it that we decided to dedicate a separate episode for Writing Task 1? That's because, according to statistics, more people find Writing Task 1 more challenging as compared to Writing Task 2. And this is not surprising actually, because Task 2 is essay writing, and when we were in school, we were asked to frequently come up with essays from time to time. But what's Writing Task 1 for the academic candidates? Statistical report. That means, say, you're going to deal with a bar graph, line graph, pie chart, table. So, Sir Brian, would you like to discuss to our viewers who among the candidates are supposed to take academic and who must take general training module? That's because if they know that this video is not for them, perhaps they can skip and move on to the next video. So who are taking ACAD and who are taking GT?
That's a very interesting question. The academic module is used for student visas, for bridging course visas, for working permits going abroad if you're a professional, and for professional registration in a foreign country. Say, for example, you're a nurse here in the Philippines and you want to also get registered as a registered nurse in a foreign country that speaks English. The general training module, on the other hand, is for immigration, for skilled trade work visas, for fiancé visas, and for spouse visas. So know what your purpose of going abroad is so that you would know what type of examination you're supposed to sit. And for those who are taking the academic module, this class is perfect for you.
But if you're taking general training, skip, move on to the next video. Look for our Writing Task 1 general training discussion. But don't be fooled, because all of our videos in iELTS Speaking and iELTS Writing Task 2, all of them are applicable for all types of iELTS candidates. So without further ado, let's talk about vocabulary in Writing Task 1. As we've mentioned earlier, this is a statistical report. So if you're a healthcare professional and you're working in, say for instance, the emergency room or the operating room, it's not as if you're going to deal with tables, bar graphs, pie charts while you're performing an operation or surgery. That's why a lot of academic candidates find it difficult to finish the writing test on time, because they don't have a wide range of words and phrases that they can use as alternatives. So let's take a look at this handout. So Sir Brian, will you please give our new subscribers an idea what this handout is all about?
This handout is actually one of the materials that we have on our website, which is www.ninerenglish.com. If you're already a student, you can download this handout and print it out if you want so that you have a hard copy. But for those of you who are not yet enrolled, you can actually subscribe to our free trial at www.ninerenglish.com and subscribe to our platinum packages for iELTS and other English exams.
Now let's talk about the introduction. If it's Writing Task 2, the three parts: intro, body, conclusion. But for iELTS Writing Task 1, it begins with the introduction, but the next part is what we call overview, the one that focuses on the trend, and the last one, specific details, or the body of the writing task. It is a bit unnecessary to write a separate conclusion if you already wrote an overview immediately after your introduction. And because we always begin with the introduction, let's take a look at samples on how you can possibly start with your intro. So you might want to write, the table or the graph illustrates the trends in. That's one suggestion. But you have to make sure that you read the task description, because when you come up with an intro, you paraphrase the task description, doing everything in your capacity to avoid copying the exact words that appeared in the task description. You don't want to be branded as copycat, right?
Yeah.
Let's take a look at other interesting phrases that you might want to consider when you take the actual exam. The chart or the graph reveals information about the changes in, something like that. Or if you want to emphasize the changes from one period to another, this one also comes in handy. The graph or the chart presents how blank, which means to say the variable, has changed over a period of, say, for instance, 5 years,
5 years,
10
10
years.
Yeah.
Another one, the graph clearly shows that, or apart from shows, you may use words like reveals, indicates, highlights, reports. These are different ways on how to come up with your introduction. What 9.09er always emphasizes, there is no such thing as one correct way.
Correct.
Meaning to say, if your English is appropriate in the context of the writing task and it is presented in a manner that's easy to digest or fathom, then you are on your way to your much coveted band score in the writing subtest. So we're done with the introduction. Let's take a look at the next line, Sir Brian. And this one talks about trends. So how important are trends in writing task 1?
Super important, because most of the time you'll be dealing with trends, especially if you have line graphs. They're increasing trends, decreasing, static, or fluctuating trends that you're going to see in your examination. So here are some verbs, and I'm also going to indicate what the nouns are for these, the equivalents. We have fluctuate, I've mentioned that a while ago, or a fluctuation. We have vary or variation. We also have rise. So if you don't want to use increase, then perhaps you could write rise. Or fall if you don't want to use decrease. And there are other words here that are quite useful. Like if it's just a slight drop, you can use the word dip. It's very useful. And for those people who are interested to know what kinds of words can you use for a stable trend, you can use remained unchanged. It's a very useful phrase that you can utilize in your examination, particularly when you have flat trends. And also, I would like to highlight peak. This is actually the highest point in a line graph. When you're able to see the highest figure right there, you can always consider it to be the peak. So you can say reached a peak of. Yeah, so perhaps we could talk about changes in trends, which I think Sir Ervin would be very much willing to share with you.
What I like about this handout that we came up with, they will give you an idea on how to use these words and phrases in a sentence. So we're not just enumerating, we're going to give you an idea what it's for, how to use it as a verb or a noun, and how to use it in a sentence. So let me read for you 2 examples. One is, the number of people who learned how to cook remained stable, something like that. Or here's an alternative. From 2000 to 2002, there were fluctuations in the number of unemployed citizens. Notice you have to be careful with your verb tenses, because if you're pertaining to something that's part of history, say for instance 2000 to 2002, we cannot use the present tense because it is pertaining to something that's done and not happening right now.
True.
Be careful with your verb tenses, because IELTS examiners will look into that while they are checking your output. So Sir Brian mentioned earlier that trends are important because you're going to highlight the trends in both the overview and the specific details. That's why you cannot keep on using the words increase and decrease all over again. Now, what are the alternatives? As I enumerate later, I'll give you an idea on how these words appear when written as part of a sentence. So here you go. Rise, increase, climb, grow, jump, improve, surge. If you want to use something that's not as common as the others mentioned, you might want to use something like skyrocket.
Wow.
Or swell, boost, or spike. We're giving you alternatives just to make sure that you avoid repetition, but it does not mean that all of them
Yeah.
have to be present in your writing task, because the words that are relatively uncommon, like skyrocket or boost or spike, are not appropriate all the time.
Yes.
Now let's move on to changes in the graph in the context of the word decrease.
Decrease.
What are the alternatives? Plummet, plunge, sink, shrink, wane, slow down. That's just the first part, the enumeration. But what about how to use them in a sentence? Let's take a look at one example. The number of gadgets bought in 2017 rose to 17,000 units per annum. Careful with the word rose. When we gave you the examples earlier, they're in the present tense, like the word rise. But because we're talking about 2017, it's 2022, 2023 now, which means to say you cannot use the present tense when you're pertaining to something that happened around 5 or 6 years ago. That's why we had to use the past tense of the verb. What about this example? The amount of money spent to purchase cars diminished in the last 5 years. Again, why in the past tense? Because you're pertaining to something that's not happening right now, but over time in the last 5 years. They are not the only examples that we have. There are more examples on how to use them in a sentence. So don't forget to download and print if you're that kind of person who would like to have a hard copy when you are reviewing. Let's take a look at the adverbs and adjectives. These are important when you want to highlight significant changes or minimal changes. So let's ask Sir Brian to focus on these adjectives and adverbs.
I love them. I love them so much that when I write, I always make sure that there are modifiers because they show to your examiner how much the increase or decrease was. So we have adverbs here, and I'm going to share with you a few of them. So if you're talking about really significant, big changes, you can use such words as significantly, rapidly, sharply, suddenly. You can also use considerably, which is one of my favorites, and
True.
steeply. All right. Now, if you're talking about moderate increases, you could probably write steadily, gradually, slightly, slowly. You can also use one of my favorite words, which I use in my actual examination, marginally.
Now, let's talk about collocations. Before I read the sample collocations, Sir Brian, what exactly are collocations? Because I keep on hearing you mention collocations in all of your speaking and writing classes. So, for the benefit of our beginners in iELTS preparation, what are collocations?
Yeah, I'm starting to sound like a broken record trying to emphasize collocations all the time in all of the videos here. But collocations are two or more words that go or blend well together. So when you use these two words, they sound very natural, and at the same time, they're extremely helpful in letting your examiner know that you have advanced or sophisticated English vocabulary.
So, what are examples of collocations? You might want to combine a verb and an adverb. Later, I'll talk about nouns plus adjectives. But because I've mentioned verbs and adverbs first, we'll focus on that one. Rise can actually be paired with the word significantly. Increase plus the word dramatically. Climb plus rapidly. Grow plus sharply. Or if you want to consider the other end of the spectrum, the minimal changes,
Yeah.
you might want to write something like fall gradually or drop slowly, decline marginally.
Yeah.
Now let's take a look at how they can possibly be used in a sentence. Here's one. The final number of purchased items decreased dramatically. Why in the past tense? Because when you buy something, it's not, when you mention the figures regarding sales, it's not as if you're just pertaining to what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Usually, if it's a study, it it takes place over a period of 5 years or 10 years. That's why we had to use the past tense right there. I cannot emphasize more on the importance of verb tenses in IELTS writing task 1 because you cannot time travel from past tense to present tense and vice versa. Now here's another example. The number of visitors in Ecuador gradually grew from 2000 to 2010. Notice I did not write or say from the year 2000 to the year 2010. That's a bit redundant for some examiners. Why? They know for a fact that 2000 is a year. So why do you have to keep on writing from the year 2000 to the year 2010?
Yeah.
That's something that the viewers or the readers already know. Okay?
Yeah.
It's an established fact. It's an assumption. So you don't have to keep on writing the year 2000, the year 2005, the year 2010. Earlier, we've mentioned that you can actually put nouns and adjectives together. So let's take a look at these examples. Okay? Dramatic increase. Or you can write something like gradual growth. The list has more than 12 examples, but let's take a look at the 2 samples on how to possibly use dramatic increase and gradual growth. Here we go. There was a dramatic increase in the final number of purchased items. Did you notice there's no more letter D after the word increase? Why?
Yes.
Because it's the word was that's in the past tense. Okay? So there was a dramatic increase. You don't write there was a dramatic increase. That's absolutely wrong. If you want to know why, check out our video on grammar. Another example, a gradual growth was seen in the number of visitors going to Ecuador. Once again, was, that's the word in the past tense. You do not write a gradual grew. So you have to consider the parts of speech when you write. So those are sample examples of collocations. Now, as we move to the last page of this handout, we're going to focus on time and percentage and fraction. So we'll ask Sir Brian to cover that.
All right, so let's talk about time, which I think is an essential component in your writing task 1 because you'll always be writing time elements in your task, especially for studies that were conducted in the past. So let's talk about some time expressions. I've learned from previous seminars that I've attended with IDP and the British Council that you shouldn't be using from and to all the time.
Correct.
Because that is very repetitive and examiners will be expecting you to use from and to all the time. So here are some alternatives that you can utilize in your examination to make it a little bit more varied. Number 1, apart from and to, you can use the pair between and. For example, between April and August. You could also write throughout or just put the year in 1988, right? You can also write, for example, the entire duration. For instance, you could say over a 7-week study period, or you could write over the past decade. If you are talking about a prediction, so you could possibly include the graph predicts that in the next few years, or you can indicate how many years there are, and then write the assumption. So these are some phrases that you can use in your examination to show time expression without having to always use from and to every single time. This one I always teach in class. When you're talking about trends, sometimes when you're looking at the chart, you cannot really pinpoint exactly what the numbers are. So approximation is vital.
True.
So we have some words here that you can use in your examination that will make it sound as if you're not really certain about the number, but you're trying to give an assumption on what the possible numerical figure is. So we have roughly, approximately, almost, nearly, about, more or less. Or if you have a precise figure like in pie charts, usually you have exact numbers there. You could write precisely. You can also approximate by saying that it is more than a particular number or over a particular numerical figure, or perhaps just a small proportion of. You could also use some other words like majority or a minority, a significant portion. There are plenty of words that you can use in your examination apart from just writing the percentages and numbers. And speaking of percentages and fractions, Sir Irvin, we usually teach in class, right, that we do not want to always just write the percentage. Say, for example, it's 50%. We don't
True.
always want to just write 50% all the time. What are other alternatives that our students and our viewers can use in their examination?
I've learned this from one of my favorite IELTS experts, and she's from British Council, Philippines. And an important lesson I'll never forget from her. IELTS experts and examiners are easily bored if you keep on using percentage all the time. That's why you might want to consider the alternative expressions. Say, for instance, if it's 23%, you don't write 23% all the time, but you might want to consider this just under a quarter.
Yeah.
Or if it's 48%, why don't you write nearly half? Let's consider something else. 73%. Earlier, you already wrote just under a quarter. So this time, it might be smarter to consider this as the substitute. Slightly less than 3/4.
Yeah.
Or if it's more than 90%, a significant majority. Once again, these are words that will help you to finish the examination on time, help you to get a higher grade for vocabulary, as this video focuses on improving your vocabulary in IELTS Writing Task 1, and help you in avoiding repetition. If you like the content of this video, pay it forward by sharing the link to your friends whom you think will benefit from this free class. We always say this, 9.09er is not about selling all the time. That's why we have free videos, not even promotional videos, but free classes on how to improve your chances of acing the examination. So please make sure to subscribe to our channel, because every week we come up with new videos that will help you and your friends to get the required band scores. Once again, we are 9.09er. Bye!
Bye.